Timber framing with big heavy oak beams is a new challenge for me that I got to try recently for a backyard project, and I can tell you the mistakes were definitely made. The project was to build an arbor in a modern style where my goal was to add some vertical interest to my landscaping scheme. If you're new to timber framing or if you want to build something similar, you should find some helpful points here, including not repeating the same mistakes I made. Let's roll the tape. The timber I'm using is 6-inch European oak. Given the size and weight, it just wasn't practical to try and put them across the jointer in my small backyard shop. Instead, I used a 3-inch power planer where I took a single pass at 1/8 of an inch along each side using a guide. You might be able to tell from the wood surface before planing that this is air-dried oak. This was my first mistake. I should really have gone with green oak. I went with air-dried as the finish I wanted to use needed a 20% or less moisture content. After planing, I added a small edge chamfer and did a rough length dimensioning using the combo of a track saw and a Japanese pull saw. Although, as the oak was not square, these cutoffs were not perfect either. Last step here was sanding, where I used my Festool Rotex 90 with 100 grit paper. I did one pass on the coarse setting, then a second on the fine random orbit setting, which did a pretty good job at removing the initial scratch marks. It was going to be a few days until I could raise the frame, and because I needed to store the timber outside, I decided to use a weather window to do surface treatment before jointing. While the two base coats went down no problem using the Osmo UV base coat, putting the tinted Osmo wax hold top coats on now was my second mistake. Given the 12-hour drying time and some mixed weather, my result was an imperfect finish that I ended up having to sand off and recoat later. Last surface preparation step was adding these post saver sleeves to the below ground section of the legs, basically large shrink wrap added with a heat gun which further protects against rot. Having marked up and done an outside roughing cut with the track saw and pull saw combo, it was on to the chisel work. For this task, I picked up a 2-inch framing chisel from Robert Sorby and combined with a 20-ounce mallet from Wood is Good. I took the chisel through my scary sharp setup, first lapping the back, then taking the 30-degree primary bevel to an optimum condition before putting in a new 2nd-degree bevel at 34 degrees, which was supplier recommended for oak. After stropping, we were good to go. Against all conventions here, I decided to go with half-lap joints rather than mortise and tenon. Some might call this my third mistake, and I'm perhaps 50-50 on this one. Chiseling the shoulders across the grain, using a piece of MDF giving reference, wasn't too bad, but I realized my fourth mistake of leaving too much material outside the line when sawing. This meant more material to remove with the chisel and a higher chance of going off square at the bottom of the shoulder, which I absolutely did in a few places. For the cheeks, I used 2 reference guides which helped, but then made my 5th mistake of trying to remove the material with the grain and with a mallet. I quickly realized this is a big no-no as it makes a total mess. Instead, remove most material across the grain with the mallet and then only go with the grain to clean up carefully and without a mallet. Before raising the arbor frame, I needed to dig some holes. Nothing technical here, just hard labor of digging down 3 feet through solid clay. My recommendation though is to make your holes cylindrical and wider than you think they should be. I went wider by 6 inches in all directions. This gives you more error margin for leg placement. Also, dig a little deeper than you need, as it will be nearly impossible to get the bottom of the hole flat. Now you can use some fine gravel to get to your target depth with decent accuracy. I marked a timber offcut of 3 feet, then combined with a spirit level resting on what will eventually be ground level to check my depth. With a basic support tower in place to help fitting the cross pieces and labour on site to help with the heavy lifting, the first build action was getting the initial side leg in the ground. Once upright, I clamped on a couple of timber legs to keep it in place and helped twist it as needed. The middle leg came next following the same procedure. I also joined a couple of timbers together and clamped on to get an indication of whether the middle leg was in a good position laterally. Once this leg was supported, but before cement was added, we brought in the first cross piece. Having done a few test fits on the ground, it actually went together okay. To make sure that the cement doesn't form a water-holding cup around the bottom of the leg, which should greatly speed up rot onset, I added another 6 inches of gravel into the hole. A few bags of quickset cement came next, followed by water to bring the mix level up to 1.5 feet below ground level, this being the depth of the surrounding planting soil. I know glue is not traditional here, but given the half laps, I thought it was a sensible addition. I used a combination of wood glue and gap filling glue, making my 6th mistake by adding too much gap filling glue and not accounting for the 4 times expansion during curing. A small amount in the center of the joint would have been fine. A few days later, I was able to get the last leg and second cross piece installed. Same process again, but more difficult to get everything lined up. The cross piece needed further adjustments, and the small movements that was needed to the leg became more difficult in the increasingly tight conditions. In the end, we got the pieces maybe within 1/4 of an inch of square, which for an arbor is probably good enough. For drilling, I didn't use any fancy offset holes, just went straight through with an arbor bit, although I did first pre-drill with a spur point bit to help achieve a more perpendicular hole. This helped, but I had a bit of a nightmare off camera when the spur point snapped in the last hole. This was my own fault as I wasn't drilling with much care, and the drill bit got super hot due to the moisture content present in the middle of the oak. For pegs, I made my 7th mistake of choosing to use dowels. Given the mixed grain in dowels, it was time consuming and difficult to pare them down to friction fit with the holes. I think dowel pegs are also not as strong as a peg made along the grain due to the mismatch of wood grain when in the hole. However, for this use case, I think they will work out okay. I again used some wood glue, and once hammered in, it was a simple matter of cutting the ends off with a pull saw. The climbing plants for the side legs are in beds I made previously, but now I needed to make a plant bed for the center leg. Once the outside of the concrete footing was mostly cured, we dug down 1.5 feet and laid some landscape fabric, followed by a rock and sand aggregate, which was compacted. With this subbase done, I used a dry mix of gravel, sharp sand and cement to work as footings for the concrete blocks as the eventual lawn perimeter. With the blocks laid, we mixed up a small batch of concrete to use as an inside-outside haunch to hold the blocks in place. A few days later, the footings and haunching were both set, and I could remove the subbase from inside and then fill with planting soil. As I mentioned earlier, I decided that the top coat finish on the oak was not good enough, so it was with a feeling of annoyance combined with the urge to get a good result that I sanded down and did another 2 top coats. The only task remaining was to add the wire trellis for the plants to grow on. While I could have done something very basic here, I decided that as my landscaping scheme has quite a few diagonal lines in it, I would reflect this within the wire rigging. My approach was to use 5mm vine eyes, which I attached by drilling into the chamfered edges. I also made up a hook drill bit to make getting the eyes in place a little quicker, although an adjustable wrench works just as well if space is tight. Each eyelet was placed a foot higher than the last and on the next chamfer around to create a spiral around the leg. I took 2 runs up each leg to get the look I wanted, and then with the plants tied to the trellis, the project was finally done.